Hey there, my name is Galena and I'm a software developer from New York. Today we'll be working locally with Git and utilizing GitHub. In this video, we will be creating our very own GitHub account and setting up Git locally on our computer through the command line. Once installed, we will be putting our Git command skills to the test and initializing a Git repository. We will then be connecting our local repository to the one we'll create on GitHub. Now, before we get started, let's recap what Git is, and most importantly, how is it useful for developers? Git is a software that allows us to keep track of changes made to a project over time. With Git, we can record project changes, store those changes, and use them as reference when needed. Developers utilize Git in order to save drafts of code so that they can access previous versions and potentially undo complicated errors. So what do we use GitHub for? We use GitHub to host these versions of code with something called a Git repository. GitHub allows us to store our local Git repositories, back up personal files, share code, and collaborate with others. Now let's pull up our article and get started. The first thing you'll want to do is create a GitHub account, and you can do that by following this link right here and clicking the Sign Up button. You will be signing up with an email, and make sure you verify your email before moving on to the next section of this article. I've already created a GitHub account for this video, and once you've successfully set up yours, your homepage should look something like this. Feel free to pause this video if you need extra time. Next, we'll be setting up Git on our computer. I'm currently using a Mac, so I would be following this first guide. The first few steps should be followed if you do not have Git installed. You can check this by simply typing Git in the terminal. And this is how we would do that. So in our Spotlight search, we would just type terminal and then Git. If you get something like this, let me just make this larger. Then you have Git installed and you can disregard the next few steps. But if you get a message that says the Git command requires the command line developer tools, would you like to install the tools now? Then you do need to install Git on your computer. Like this, you can just hit install. Then you should have a window come up that asks you if you agree to the terms of service. Then you can click agree. And when the download finishes, you will see this window, and you can click Done, completing the installation process. So for step 5, we will be setting up our Git username and email together. I'm going to navigate to GitHub's article on how to set up both. So first, let's do the GitHub username. Excuse me, the Git username. So here, I've already downloaded and installed the latest version of Git. Oh, and if you want to check the latest version of Git on your machine, you can easily do that. I'm going to navigate here into my terminal and just type git dash 2 dashes followed by version. And this will return the current version that you have installed on your machine. If you would like, you can also update to the latest version, which is recommended, and you can navigate to git/scm.com to see what the latest version is. So here it says 2.18.0, which is exactly what I have installed on my machine. All right, let's get back to our article. So I'm going to set up my Git username. I've downloaded and installed the latest version of Git, so that's good. Now we want to set up the username. So there are a few important things to note here. Let's make sure we read this description very carefully. Git uses a username to associate commits with an identity. The Git username is not the same as your GitHub username. So whatever GitHub username you have signed up with a few minutes earlier, it does not have to be the same Git username that we're going to sign up with now. So you can change the name that is associated with your Git commits using the git config command. The new name you set will be visible in any future commits you push to GitHub from the command line. And lastly, if you'd like to keep your real name private, you can use any text as your Git username. So you don't have to enter your real name in the prompt. So then we also need to choose if we'd like to set our Git username for every repository on the computer or just for a single repository. So I'm going to be doing this for every repository on my computer. So I'm going to be following these steps right here. So I have terminal opened and I want to set a Git username with the following command. So let me minimize this so I can have my terminal and my browser side by side. So what I'm first going to do is enter this git config command. So now I have git config global user.name, and I'm going to give it code academy. Perfect. Now we want to confirm that we have set the git username correctly by typing git config global user.name and hitting enter. Perfect, and it was correctly set to code academy. Next, we're going to want to set up the email. So let's navigate back to our article and click the link attached to email. So GitHub uses the email address set in your local Git configuration to associate commits pushed from the command line with your GitHub account. You can use git config to change the email address you associate with your Git commits. So the new email address will be visible in any future commits you push to GitHub from the command line. So any commits you made prior to changing your commit email address are still associated with your previous email address. So here again, we're going to be setting our email address either for every repository on the computer or just for a single repository. So I'm going to be following this route right here, and I'm going to use the following command to set my email address. So I'm going to use git config global user.email. Followed by the email. Now, to check and confirm that you have set the email address correctly, you just run git config global user.email. And that is the email that I've set it up with. Perfect. Now, lastly, we need to add this email address to our GitHub account. Let's navigate and set up our email address on GitHub. So first, in the upper right corner of any page, click your profile photo and then click settings. So let's navigate to GitHub. And on my home page, I'm going to click my profile picture. And under it, click settings. Then in the left sidebar, you're just going to click emails. I'm not going to show a walkthrough of these steps for security reasons, but I will open up these screenshots and tell you where you should be. So in add email address, you're going to see that once you click emails, you can type your email address and click add. And this is what it's going to look like. Then you want to verify your email address. Next, in the primary email address list, select the email address you'd like to associate with your web-based Git operations, and it would look like this. And lastly, to keep your email address private when performing web-based Git operations, click Keep My Email Address Private. And that would look something like this, and you would just need to check this box right here. Now, once we've done that, we're ready to move on to the next step. Now, GitHub offers two authentication options, HTTPS and SSH, to keep your work secure. Now, this is a security measure which prevents anyone who isn't authorized from making changes to your GitHub repository. In this article, we'll be using HTTPS, and let's follow this link and the instructions to configure your computer to be able to use HTTPS. So first, we're going to want to install the OSX keychain helper and tell Git to use it. So let's first check if installed, and for that I'm just going to type git credential OSX keychain. Now if you get the following result, which is what I see here, that means that the helper is installed and we do not need to go through this process right here. Now, in step 3, we can tell Git to use keychain helper using the global credential helper config. So I'm going to use git config global credential helper OSX keychain. Perfect. So what this means is the next time you clone an HTTPS URL that requires a password, you'll be prompted for a username and password and to grant access to the OSX keychain. Now, after you've done that, the username and password are stored and you won't be required to type them into Git again. Now, once you've done that, we are ready for the next step of the article. Now that we've successfully set up Git on our computer and created a GitHub account, we are ready to use those Git skills in the terminal. So we're going to be running a few commands to initialize a Git repository. So here they are. Now let's navigate to our terminal and follow these steps. So first we want to use the make dir command, and let's recall that make dir means create a directory or make a directory. So the name of our directory is git practice, git_practice. And then I want to cd into git practice or change directory inside of git practice. Next, I want to initialize a Git repository. So to do that, I'm going to use the git init command. It turns the current empty directory into a fresh Git repository. So I have git init, and it says initialize empty Git repository, which is exactly what we've wanted. Next, we're going to be using the echo command, which is going to take this text and place it into a README text file. Use echo hello Git and GitHub. And the file I want that to go into is the README text file. This is what your command should look like. Now let's hit enter. Now we want to add the new file to the Git staging area. For that, we'll use the git add command. So git add readme.txt. And lastly, we want to commit the changes. So we're going to use git commit -m and a small description of what we've just done and what this is. So we're going to use first commit. Let's hit enter. Now, once we've done that, we're ready for the last section of our article. We'll create a repository on GitHub and then link it to a local repository on our computer. This will allow us to back up our work so we never need to worry about losing our work again. So now let's connect our local Git repository to GitHub. The first thing we're going to want to do is ensure that current working directory is your new Git repository. Navigate there if not. So we're currently in the Git practice directory, and that is my new Git repository, so I'm there. And next, I want to check the status of which files and folders are new or have been edited. We can do this with the git status. Perfect, so we have nothing to commit, no files modified. So next, we're going to navigate to GitHub and create a new repository by clicking the new repository button on the home page. So I'm going to pull up my GitHub account. So I'm going to navigate to your repositories and click this green button that says new. And then I'm going to create a new repository. So let's give that a second. Then on the new repository page, you want to give your repository a name. It's not necessary, but it would be convenient to name it the same as the directory, which is Git practice. After naming the new repository, let's click create repository. So here I'm going to add Git practice as the repository name. Lastly, I want it to be public, and then I want to hit create repository. Then after creating the repository, GitHub displays the repository page. And at the top of the page, we want to make sure that HTTPS is selected, and it is. And now our repository is empty at this point. It's time to connect it to our existing work. We're going to copy the Git commands on the GitHub page under the title or push an existing repository from the command line. So here it is. So now I'm going to pull up my terminal. Let's move this to the side. Here we are. And now I'm going to take these two lines of code and paste them into my terminal. So first I'm going to be using git remote add origin. So I'm going to copy that, paste, and hit enter. And once you've done that, we can do git push u origin master. Perfect. So now we're prompted to enter our GitHub username. So I have Code Academy Videos. Or is it video? Let me double check. Oh, it's Code Academy Video. Perfect. So remember that this is the username you have on your GitHub, not the Git username we signed up with a couple of steps ago. So I'm going to hit enter, and now I'm going to enter the password I used. Perfect. So now when you've entered the correct username and password, you should see the following report that the push was complete. We should pull up our repository and see the text that we've entered earlier. And here it is. Here is our README text. Here is the text that we entered into that file. The README file is the perfect place to write a description of your project. And there we have it, our first GitHub repository linked to our local Git repository. As a developer, you'll likely be following this process often, and pushing a local project to GitHub will become second nature. And not only does Git provide us a version control system for our projects, but GitHub is also a form of coding skill exposure. So feel free to continue practicing and upload a project or two up to GitHub the way we just did. Good luck, and I'll see you next time. Happy coding.